If you're a content creator looking to improve your photography skills to enhance the visual quality of your content, here's a beginner's guide to photography. Know your camera. Understand the basic functions and settings of your camera, whether it's a DSLR, mirrorless, or even a smartphone. Familiarize yourself with features like ISO, aperture, shutter speed, focus modes, and white balance. Knowing your camera and understanding its basic functions and settings is fundamental to becoming a better photographer and content creator. Here's a breakdown of key camera settings you should familiarize yourself with. ISO. ISO refers to the sensitivity of your camera's sensor to light. A low ISO setting, for example, 100, is best for well-lit situations, as it produces the least amount of noise, graininess, in the image. Higher ISO settings, for example, 800 or above, are used in low light conditions to capture more light, but they may result in increased noise. Aperture. Aperture controls the size of the opening in the lens through which light enters the camera. It is measured in f-stops, for example, f/2.8, f/5.6. A low f-stop, for example, f/2.8, creates a shallow depth of field, blurring the background and isolating the subject. A higher f-stop, for example, f/8, produces a deeper depth of field, keeping more of the image in focus. Shutter speed. Shutter speed determines how long the camera's shutter remains open to capture light. It is measured in seconds or fractions of a second, for example, 1/1000th, 1/250, 1/30. Faster shutter speeds, for example, 1/1000th, freeze motion, while slower speeds, for example, 1/30, create motion blur. Focus modes. Different focus modes allow you to control how the camera focuses on your subject. Common focus modes include single AF, AFS. The camera focuses once when the shutter button is half pressed and locks the focus until the picture is taken. Continuous AF, AFC. The camera continuously adjusts focus as the subject moves, useful for capturing action or moving subjects. Manual focus, MF. You manually adjust the focus ring on the lens to focus on your subject. White balance. White balance helps adjust the color temperature of your images to match the lighting conditions. Different light sources, for example, daylight, incandescent, fluorescent, have varying color temperatures, and setting the appropriate white balance ensures accurate color representation in your photos. Exposure compensation. Exposure compensation allows you to adjust the exposure value set by the camera. Use it to make your images brighter or darker, especially when shooting in tricky lighting situations. Natural lighting. Make the most of natural light, especially during the golden hour, shortly after sunrise and before sunset. Soft, diffused lighting is generally more flattering and can add depth and dimension to your photographs. Avoiding harsh shadows is essential for capturing more flattering and visually appealing photographs. Harsh shadows can be unflattering, create distracting elements, and reduce the overall quality of your images. Here are some tips to minimize or eliminate harsh shadows. Golden hour and overcast days. Shoot during the golden hour, which occurs shortly after sunrise and before sunset. During these times, the sun's light is softer, diffused, and casts longer shadows that add depth to your photos. Overcast days also provide natural diffused light, reducing harsh shadows. Shade or diffused light. If shooting under direct sunlight is unavoidable, find shade or use a diffuser to soften the light. A diffuser is a translucent material or device placed between the subject and the light source, which spreads the light and reduces harsh shadows. Reflectors. Reflectors bounce light back onto the subject, filling in shadows and creating more balanced lighting. You can use a commercial reflector or even a white foam board or a piece of aluminum foil as a DIY reflector. Avoid high noon sun. The midday sun, around noon, creates harsh, overhead lighting, casting unflattering shadows on faces. If possible, schedule your shoots for earlier or later in the day when the sun is lower in the sky. Soft light sources. When shooting indoors, use soft light sources like studio softboxes, umbrella lights, or a window with diffused curtains. Soft light creates gentle shadows that are more flattering for portraits and product photography. Fill flash. Use a fill flash to reduce harsh shadows in backlit situations or when there's strong contrast between the subject and the background. The fill flash helps balance the exposure and lightens shadows. Positioning and angles. Adjust your shooting angles to minimize shadows. For example, if you're shooting outdoors, Position the subject facing away from the sun or use side lighting to create more pleasing shadows. Mastering focusing techniques and understanding depth of field are essential skills for content creators to capture captivating and visually striking images. Here's a breakdown of these concepts. Focus techniques. Use the autofocus (AF) mode on your camera for quick and accurate focusing in most situations. Different cameras offer various AF modes, such as single point AF, zone AF, or face detection AF. Experiment with these modes to see which one works best for different subjects and scenarios. If your camera allows manual focus, consider using it in situations where autofocus might struggle, such as low light conditions or when the subject lacks contrast. Depth of field, DOF. Depth of field refers to the area in your image that appears sharp and in focus. It is influenced by several factors, including aperture, focal length, and the distance between the camera, subject, and background. A shallow depth of field occurs when only a small portion of the image is in focus, and the background appears blurred. This effect is often used in portrait photography to isolate the subject from distractions or to create a dreamy, artistic look. A deep depth of field occurs when a large portion of the image is in focus, from the foreground to the background. This effect is useful in landscape photography, where you want to capture intricate details throughout the scene. Aperture and DOF. Aperture plays a significant role in controlling depth of field. A wide aperture, for example, f/1.8, f/2.8, creates a shallow DOF, while a narrow aperture, for example, f/8, f/16, produces a deep DOF. Use a wide aperture for portraits or when you want to draw attention to a specific subject, blurring the background to create separation and emphasize the subject's details. Use a narrow aperture for landscape photography or situations where you want everything in the frame to be in focus, such as product photography or architectural shots. Focal length and DOF. Longer focal lengths, for example, 85 mm, 200 mm, tend to have a shallower DOF, making them ideal for portrait and subject isolation shots. Shorter focal lengths, for example, 24 mm, 35 mm, generally have a deeper DOF, making them suitable for capturing expansive scenes in landscape photography. Focus stacking, advanced technique. In certain situations, such as macro photography or landscapes with both foreground and background elements you want in focus, focus stacking can be used. It involves taking multiple shots at different focus distances and combining them in post-processing to achieve a deep DOF throughout the image. Rule of simplicity. Keep your compositions simple and clutter-free. A clean background or a shallow depth of field can help draw attention to your main subject. Practice composition and framing. Regularly practice framing and composing your shots. Experiment with different angles and perspectives to find the most captivating viewpoints. Editing basics. Learn some basic photo editing techniques to enhance your images further. Adjust exposure, contrast, colors, and sharpness to bring out the best in your photos. Shoot in RAW. If possible, if your camera allows it, shoot in RAW format. RAW files retain more data and offer greater flexibility during post-processing compared to compressed JPEG files. Study and learn from others. Study the work of photographers you admire. Look for their composition, use of light, and editing style to gain inspiration and insight into improving your own photography. Patience and practice. Photography is a skill that takes time and practice to master. Be patient with yourself and keep practicing regularly to refine your techniques and develop your unique style. Experiment and have fun. Don't be afraid to try new things and experiment with different styles and subjects. Photography is an art form, and having fun and expressing your creativity is essential to grow as a content creator. Remember, photography is a journey of continuous learning and improvement. As you progress and gain more experience, your photography skills will undoubtedly enhance the visual appeal of your content and help you connect better with your audience. Happy shooting!